channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Happy Saturday, you guys. For today's video, I have a couple of Valentine's themed thrift flips for you guys. I actually made over a couple of items that I just recently picked up on one of our junk runs. I think they turned out super cute and I can hardly wait to show them to you. And without further ado, let's get to today's video. My first project for today is a really simple one. I grabbed this little angel statue on my last junk run and I thought he'd be great with my Valentine's Day display, but I didn't really care for the kind of pinky gray color that he was, so I am giving him a little bit of a makeover. I'm using DIY's Prairie Gray for this, and at first I started with my larger brush, kind of pouncing that paint on. Quickly realized that I was not going to be able to work the paint down into all of the little details in this guy with that big brush. So I ended up having to use a little brush to get the paint into all of the nooks and crannies on this. And I did have to break out my hairdryer too, just to dry him off as I was moving my hands around to hold him. I kept hitting places where the paint was still wet and peeling the paint off with my fingers. So it was best to just keep drying him as I went. Once I had a good coat of paint on my little angel and he was completely dry, it was time to seal him. And for that, I'm using DIY's white wax. And for this little guy, I chose not to use a coat of clear wax before I put the white wax on. I just went directly onto that Prairie Gray with the white wax because to me, this makes it look a little bit like stone. And that was the look I was going for with this little angel. So I just went over the whole thing with this little brush, working that wax into all the nooks and crannies and just making sure that it was a nice thin layer of wax. I'm not going to be wiping this back, but it should dry in about 24 hours. I love how this little angel came out. I can hardly wait to put him in with my Valentine's display, and I hope you guys like him too. My second project is kind of 3 projects all in one. If you guys watched my most recent thrift haul, you saw that I also picked these little frames up. They were $4.99 for the set of 3 of them. And I knew right away that I wanted to do something for Valentine's Day with these. The first step was taking them apart and sanding down the inserts just a little bit to get rid of some of that super dark red that was on them, and just to make sure that I had a nice, clean, smooth surface to paint. I think I'm using 150 grit sandpaper here, and I'm not really worried about getting all the way down through that red. I just wanted to lighten it up a little, and then I cleaned them off and set them aside. Then I moved on to the frames, and first step is cleaning them off. They were a little bit dusty. And then I noticed that some of them were kind of separated in a couple of the corners. So I grabbed my spackle and I just smoothed some spackle into those cracks and then wiped back the excess with a shop towel. While those were drying, I moved back to the little inserts and I went ahead and gave them a good coat of shellac just to make sure that I didn't have any bleed through with that dark red color. Then it was back to the frames, and I decided to go with 3 different colors on these rather than painting them all the same. So for one, I am using DIY's Aviary, which is a beautiful, beautiful green. Then I am using DIY's Prairie Gray, which is this beautiful kind of taupey beige color. And on the third frame, I am using Little Black Dress. Once I had one good coat of paint on each of my frames, I set those aside to dry and I went back to the inserts again, and I'm going over each of these with a coat of Crinoline by DIY. Now, DIY paint is thick and it's clay based and it is highly pigmented, and you can see what a good job just one coat of that Crinoline does over that super dark red color. Then it was back to the frames for a second coat of paint. This second coat wasn't absolutely necessary in most places, but the frames themselves had a pretty slick finish. So there were just a couple spots that I needed to cover, but I like to overdo things sometimes. So I ended up going over the entire frames with that second coat of paint. Now, I knew I wanted to use some of my Sola wood flowers on these, and I knew they were going to have to dry overnight, so I needed to get this part done. And so I am using some paint and water to dye these. I've had these Sola wood flowers in my stash for probably 2 years now, and I've never used them before. So I was a little bit nervous about this dyeing process, but I just put a little bit of acrylic paint in the bottom of 2 cups. And for the third one, I'm actually using a vintage pink, which is one of the cottage colors by DIY. And the reason I chose it was because I knew it had a built-in sealer, so I wouldn't have to worry about sealing the paint on my flowers. So I'm just dipping those flowers into each color respectively. And then towards the end, I decided to do a little bit of experimentation with the colors, and I dipped a few more into those. Then I did set these aside, like I said, to dry overnight so that I could use them on my frames the next day. Another piece of this project are these little signs that I've had in my stash for a while, and they're chalk on one side and plain on the back, and I knew I wanted to paint them, so I'm going to be painting the backs of them, but I wasn't excited about the holes in them. So I went ahead and put some painter's tape over the holes and then used some Durham's water putty to fill them. Then I went back to the inserts again, and I'm going to be decoupaging them with this beautiful paper by Redesign with Prima. It's called Botanical Imprint. First thing I needed to do was steam out the wrinkles. These papers are always wrinkled when you get them, and so you either need to use an iron or a steamer like this one to get those wrinkles out before you apply your paper. Once I had all my wrinkles removed, I cut my paper to size. Luckily, I had enough in this one strip to cover all 3 of the inserts. And then it was time to decoupage them on. For my medium, I'm using DIY's Clear Liquid Patina. This is my go-to medium anytime I'm doing decoupage. It works well even on these more fibrous, thicker papers by Redesign. So the key here is just putting down a nice even layer of the medium onto your piece and then smoothing your paper down over that medium and then going over that paper with another fairly thick coat of that medium. Now, of course, this procedure changes a little bit if you're using a thinner paper or if you're going over a larger surface. Once I'd finished this first insert, I moved on to the second 2 using the same procedure. Once I'd finished with the inserts, I set them aside to dry, and while they were drying, I moved back to working on these tags. And so I'm just peeling off the little bit of tape that I put on them and then sanding smooth the water putty. Once I had them all sanded nice and smooth, I wiped them back down again, and then I went ahead and gave them a coat of DIY's Crinoline. Now the nice thing was, since this is such a light color wood, it only took me one coat of the crinoline to cover them. Then it was back to the inserts. They were nice and dry, so it was time to remove the excess decoupage paper. For that, I'm using some 120 grit sandpaper, and I'm just holding them onto the edge of my table, and then in a downward sweeping motion, I am just sanding that excess paper right off of the edges. This is a really easy procedure, and it makes a nice clean line around your project. So now my inserts are basically finished, my tags are about halfway there, and it's time to move back to working on the frames again. I needed to seal my paint, so I grabbed my DIY clear wax to start, and I'm giving each one of these a nice, thin, even coat of clear wax. I'm brushing that on with my soft bristle brush, and then I am using a dry shop towel to gently wipe back the excess. Now, since I wanted these to have kind of a fun, soft, springy look to them, I decided to go over the clear wax with a coat of DIY's white wax. Now, since I put the clear wax down first, this white wax isn't going to saturate into my paint and really take over as the dominant color, which is kind of nice. It's just going to leave a nice hint of that white down in the crevices to really make all of the little details in these frames stand out. So again, I'm using the same brush and just putting on a nice even coat of that white wax and wiping back the excess very gently with my dry shop towel. Now it's time to finish off my tags, and so I am using a little stamp set that I've had for many years that I'm pretty sure I got off of Amazon, and I'm using the lowercase letters to spell out the word love. I'm putting it on this piece of backer board, pressing those letters down, and I'm using StazOn ink, which is permanent, and then I'm very carefully positioning those stamps over where I want them, and then using my fingers to just press down those letters to make sure that I have a nice impression of my stamp. I did love on one, and then I spelled out XOXO for the second one, and then I had a hard time deciding what I wanted to put on the third one, and I ended up going with the word sweet. So of course I had to do it with just one E and then go back in with that E one more time to fill it in. Now, of course, these also need to be sealed, so I grabbed out my clear wax again, and I went over them with a very light coat of DIY's clear wax. I just put that on very gently and then wiped back the excess with a shop towel very, very lightly. And once I was done with that, I decided they were a little bright to go against the decoupage paper that I had chosen. So I grabbed some DIY dark wax and a little kind of pointy brush, and I went around the edges and just kind of swirled around some dark wax to give this a little bit more of a patina. Then I wanted a little bit darker of an outline around the outside. So I took my ink pad and I just went around each of the tags as I was finished with them and wiped the ink onto the very edge of my tags, which gave them a really nice little black outline. I did the same procedure for all 3 tags, and then I believe I have all of the pieces ready finally, and I can actually start putting my frames together, you guys. So of course the first step is putting the inserts back into each of the frames, making sure that I have them right side up as I'm doing it, and then pushing those cute little posts back down to hold them in. And once I have all three inserts back into their frames, it is time to start decorating. So I took each of my tags and laid them into the middle of the frames just to kind of get an eye for how it was going to look when I was finished. And then I grabbed out my Titebond quick and thick and glued or put some glue on the back of each of the tags, and then pushed them down into the center of each of my frames. Once I was done gluing the tags down into each frame, it was time for some flowers. I was so excited to finally get to use these Sola wood flowers that I've had for so long. So I took a few and just kind of played with them a little bit to figure out exactly how I wanted them to sit on these frames. And then I just used my hot glue gun and glued each one down individually, just making sure that they were seated down nice and tight when I was finished. So I put my first one down, and then I glued in my little flower, and then just added that little white one. And then again, just kind of holding them in place to make sure that glue dries nicely. And then if you've been watching me a while, you know I have a thing for bling. And so I grabbed out one of these little pieces of bling I got on Amazon ages ago and added one of those as well. I did this same procedure on the other two frames, trying to pick flowers of differing colors and textures for each one. And then of course, adding that piece of bling in the end to add a little bit of sparkle to each one of my frames. I know these were a lot. There were so many pieces and parts to them, and I apologize for all the flipping back and forth between them, but they were a lot of fun to make, and I really love how they came out. I hope you guys do too. For today, you guys. What did you think of my Valentine's Day projects? I hope you liked them. I really had fun, honestly, making those little frames. I know there were so many little pieces and parts and things that needed to all come together for the end result, but I really like how they turned out, and it was sure fun getting to use those Sola wood flowers. I've had those, not even kidding, probably at least 2 or 3 years in my stash, and I have never been able to figure out a use for them. So it was really nice to actually get to use some of them on this project. Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And of course, if you would, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then of course, don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of today's projects. A quick reminder, any of the paint and products you see me use can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. I do carry DIY paint and products, as well as Sweet Pickins milk paint and products, Recycled Treasures decoupage papers, and some Redesign with Prima. And since we're on the subject of products, I wanted to let you guys know that I did bring in a couple of paintbrushes from Sweet Pickins. My SA50 that I use is a Klingon, and it is by far my favorite brush. And so I brought 2 of them in to my web shop to see if you guys had any interest. So if you do, they are there under the Sweet Pickins milk paint. So check those out. Also, just a quick reminder too, Juniper is still on sale through the end of the month at 35% off, which is a beautiful color if you have any interest. And lastly, I just placed my order for Redesign with Prima for their Q1 release. I can hardly wait to get my hands on it. So stay tuned. As soon as I can show it to you guys, I will. Anyway, for Wednesday's video, it will definitely be some more thrift flips. So I hope you'll join me back here for that. Until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your weekend and beginning of the week. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you back here on Wednesday. Bye.